You're listening to Real Talk Texas with local expert Steve Hakes. Now, here's Steve.
Welcome back to Real Talk Texas. Today in the studio, we've got Carl Stanley of Rising Point Solutions. And his company's located in Grapevine, Texas. He's got a large team of experts there that are ready and willing to help you out in the credit world. At Real Talk Texas, we always try to bring the real experts from the Metroplex into our studio to talk about different topics. And Carl with Rising Point Solutions, they're our expert for credit on Real Talk Texas. And, Carl, before the break, we talked a little bit about, some of the success stories you've had. And, what are some of the things you've seen from consumers? What are some of the surprises that they've brought to you that they didn't know were on their credit?
Oh, my gosh. I could go on and on about that, but I think the most important thing to relay to the listening audience is that it's so important to check your credit on a regular basis and monitor it. We have consumers all the time come into our office for a variety of different reasons. Maybe they were a victim of identity theft and they weren't even aware of it. Maybe they recently went through a divorce and their spouse is not paying the mortgage and that's affecting their credit. Maybe they had an accident or an illness a couple years ago and the medical insurance didn't cover some of the medical bills that they thought they did, and they've got some medical collections on their credit report that they weren't aware of. So I think it all comes down to being proactive and making sure you're doing what you can to view your credit every 3 to 6 months and make sure those things aren't happening before it becomes a problem, before you apply for a loan.
Well, how do they do that? I mean, how's the average consumer? Most people don't know how they can have access to what's being reported on them.
Well, there's a number of ways to do it. The Federal Trade Commission has set up or required the bureaus to provide a free copy of your credit report once a year, and I believe the website for that is annualcreditreport.com. So that's one way you can do it is, once, at least a minimum of once a year is what I would recommend. I would do it more often, but once a year you can go to annualcreditreport.com, get a free copy of your credit report from all three bureaus. Now, that doesn't include scores. You have to pay extra for the scores. So there are a number of online sites that have filled up the gap in the marketplace for that, such as, Credit Keeper, ScoreSense, Identity Guard, True Credit. There's a number of them.
But I would like to warn people out there, too. There are some websites that I know Credit Keeper seems to be pretty close to what your scores will actually be if I pull credit. But there's some of them out there that you see advertised a lot on TV that those scores really aren't even close to what I see when I pull a mortgage credit report.
Right. You got to be careful with that. I would recommend Identity Guard or myfico.com. Those sites are the ones that we've seen that will pull credit scores closest to the scores that a lender would pull. You got to remember, when you're pulling an online report, basically what you're doing is you're getting a consumer-based copy of your credit scores and credit report, not what a lender would pull. So the variation could be 40, 50, or 100 points. Some of those online sites use different scoring formulas and different scoring models than what the lending community does. So I would recommend Identity Guard, MyFICO, or even if you get your credit reports from annualcreditreport.com and you want to know what your scores are, you can pay the extra $8 or $10 to get the scores, and you're going to know they're accurate and what the Bureau is providing to the lenders.
Well, yeah, and I think one of the keys there is to make sure that you know what's going on. And in an age of the internet, and everything's really changed. And you had mentioned before about identity theft. I mean, I recently had a gentleman that had me pull his credit. He was going to buy a house. Good job. Everything looked good. And we pulled his credit, and everything looked okay there. And then we did in the mortgage industry, we are now required on every file to take your tax returns, and then we pull a 4506T, which is a government document that verifies that what you gave us was actually what was filed with the IRS. And it's just kind of this line says this number, this line says that number. This client, he freaked out, and I kind of freaked out with him. He found out that we got back to him and said, hey, your credit report's not matching up to what the IRS says. He said, what do you mean? He said, this is what I filed. Here's what I signed. My accountant sent it in on this date. And I said, no, our report back from the IRS says it was done 6 months ago right at April. He goes, no, I filed for an extension. Someone had somehow gotten his driver's license and his Social Security card. They had actually filed a federal tax return, got a refund where he had to actually pay, but they had filed a false tax return where he got a refund. And then the other thing, which really blew me away, was we looked at his driver's license and it was expired for a month. So we said, no, you got to go to the driver's license bureau and get an updated driver's license. Well, he called me from the driver's license just in a panic. He said someone had gone in 4 months before that and actually got a driver's license. So evidently what they did was they put a different address, got their picture taken, his driver's license, his identity, and now they're going around, they're opening credit, and they're getting a tax refund. I think that's pretty bold that someone actually do that. And so he filed a police report. We did all these things to try to help him out, and we actually did the loan based on the fact that his CPA, verified the actual tax returns. He filed a report with the IRS. He also got a new driver's license and filed identity theft charges. And I think what happened was someone had broken into his apartment, if I remember right, and they stole his computer. And it's amazing what people put on their laptops or their computers that aren't password protected, and they had basically an open carte blanche to everything that he had.
Yeah, and although you were able to do the loan for this gentleman, which is great, he is probably going to be suffering the consequences of this identity theft for years. For the average consumer, it takes something like 6 years and multiple police reports and tens of thousands of dollars to rectify identity theft problems. And the filing of false tax returns is one of the biggest and newest trends in the identity theft industry. In fact, there was a story on the news not long ago about a gentleman who was filing false tax returns on consumers from prison and getting refund checks sent to the prison. So,
oh man!
So people, if they want to victimize other people, are going to find ways to do it. And that example is only one of hundreds that I could tell you about of different schemes that are going on right now. So it's so important to monitor your credit and so important to make sure that you take precautions not to let that happen to you. Simple stuff like password protection. And the vast majority of identity theft, even though there's these incredibly elaborate schemes that you hear about like this one, the vast majority of identity theft takes place from carelessness. So, it's somebody peeking over your shoulder at your PIN number. It's somebody, that gets access to your Social Security number off a piece of mail that you threw in the trash. So you just got to be very, very careful about, the disbursement of your personal information.
Well, if you just tuned in, you're listening to KLIF. You're listening to Real Talk Texas, and today we've got a real expert in our studio, and it's Carl Stanley of Rising Point Solutions. That's Rising Point Solutions. You can reach them at risingpointsolutions.com online, or you can just send a text to the show, and we'll get you in touch with Carl and his team. Send a text to this number right here. It's 817-925-2546. That's 817-925-2546. He's offering free consultation to our listeners out there, and he can make sure that your credit report tells the truth about who you are and what you're doing with your credit. He'll also give you strategies. His team give you strategies on how to improve where you are today to get it to the point where you're getting the paper rates from all your different resources that you're getting, be it your insurance company, your mortgage company, your auto loan, or even your credit card debt companies. Carl can help you with all that advice. We talked about identity theft. We've talked about things you need to do to make sure that you get all the bad stuff, inaccuracies off your credit report. I think with my license, I signed up to a credit monitoring service. So anything happens, somebody pulls credit, it costs me, I think, about $10 a month. But because of the nature of the business that I'm in, and I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there that work for companies that pull credit before they hire you, or they maybe they're licensed, so that has to be renewed once a year. I don't ever want a surprise. What are the things that you do as far as making sure that they're ready to go when they get ready to apply for a job?
Well, that's a relatively new trend in the industry as well. I mean, over the last 10 years, what you've seen is you've seen banks and credit unions and other financial institutions implement, and even your industry, the mortgage industry, implement basically minimum scores as a requirement for employment. So, there's not much outside the normal scope of services that we can do to prepare a consumer for that, except to say, hey, it's very important that you monitor your credit as you go. Be aware of what's on there before you go in for an interview. The last thing you want to do is sit in front of a hiring manager or a potential place of employment and to not know what's on your credit report when they do.
That's pretty scary if you're just sitting there kind of wondering what they're going to see.
Right. So what's going to happen is, if you're interviewing for a job position and they say, hey, I noticed that you had this car repo and you had this and these credit cards were charged off, or, you have all this debt on your credit report and it's not yours, then you're not going to be able to be prepared to answer that questions. And I suspect if they feel like you don't know what's going on in your financial life, that you're not going to be able to help their customers and other people in their financial life.
Well, if you're listening out there, we need to wrap this up, but I highly, highly recommend that everybody listening out there protect your credit. I tell my children that. I said, protect your credit. Make sure you know what's going on. Don't fly around blind. Make sure you know what's going on. We've had a real good conversation with Carl. Carl's with Rising Point Solutions in Grapevine, right in the middle of Metroplex here. Great firm. Highly recommend them. If you're listening out there, make sure you send that text to the show, 817-925-2546. That's 817-925-2546. You've been listening to Real Talk Texas. Tune in next week when we've got another real expert on the show to talk about things that you might need to help you in your life. You're listening to KLIF, AM 570, News and Information Radio. Thanks for listening.